Welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the creator of this office altering podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. As always, you can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. Today, we are talking about the influence mindset, the art and science of getting people to choose you. And I am so honored to have a published author here, Hansen, who wrote the title of this book and is going to lead us in an amazing conversation today. And I just got to do a really good big shout out to my girl, Victoria Collier, attorney Victoria Collier. Victoria and I, as many of you know, we're business partners, and we no longer are part of that business, but we are dear, dear, dear friends. And we both love all this mindset stuff. And constantly we're sending each other books or podcasts or what have you. And Victoria sent me this book and I plowed through it one weekend. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to email the author of this book, hunt him down, find him on LinkedIn and see if he wants to come on my podcast. And guess what? He said yes. And he is here today. So Christian, welcome.
Thank you so much, Molly. It's great to be here.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So tell us a little bit about your backstory and then we'll dive into the nuts and bolts of the topic today, the influence mindset, and tell us how you got here as a published author.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's thank you again. It's great to be on this podcast, and I've really enjoyed listening to a lot of the stuff that you produce, and learning more about your company and helping specifically entrepreneurs navigate an incredibly complicated world that we all have to figure out. So it's great to be here. Well, just it's funny. How does a personal brand expert, get to the scene when my career has mostly started off largely in higher education? It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition. So starting off in higher education, I worked as an undergraduate admissions officer. I then was the associate director of an MBA program, and I also worked in corporate HR running internships. And, it's funny because what do all of these things have in common? Well, essentially, as I was reviewing and interviewing thousands and thousands of candidates, I realized that I had a front row seat into learning how people deal with one of the biggest challenges that we all face in life. And that is, how do you stand out when everybody else is trying to stand out too? And here's what I learned. Most of the time, we live and operate in environments where, your success is based on how well you perform. And so we learn how to do that. So for example, right, in school, if you study hard, you know the material, then you get good grades. If in your job, you work hard, you're qualified, then you get paid. And as an entrepreneur, if you provide an excellent quality service, then your clients will come back again and again. But every so often, and we come into these situations that I call selective environments, where the doors of opportunity swing or shut. So for like kids, this can equal college applications or job interviews. And for entrepreneurs, it's when you're trying to market and trying to pitch your services to people. Well, in this situation, in these selective environments, all of a sudden success is not based on how smart, capable, qualified, or passionate you are. Ultimately, success really boils down to, do you influence somebody to choose you over others? And the problem is that because we're programmed and 99% of our life is based on showing that we can perform well, that we're capable and qualified, that's kind of our go-to, function. We just start saying, well, I'm really smart, capable, qualified, and passionate. But if everybody else is doing that, and success in these selective environments is really about influencing decision makers to choose you, if you sound just like everybody else, then you're not going to be successful. And that's when I started noticing what I call the influence mindset. How do I, when I walk into these very specific situations, and when my clients are trying to enter these very specific situations, how do they cultivate their personal brand message so that it rises above the noise gets past the neurodefenses that are trying to block and obfuscate everything, and communicate directly to the hearts and minds of the people they're trying to reach. And that's ultimately that's the big backstory of how I got here.
Wow. And I love the influence mindset. And really, as you talk about the art and science of why people choose you, talk to us a little bit about that. And kind of, I think you talk about in your book too, when you build your message on the three key. And I love that you say, we're talking to attorneys, so they love research-backed strategies that will really help you bypass the brain's defenses. I just love that in the book.
For sure. Well, it starts off with understanding what is the moment that our prospects are in when we're trying to connect and reach with them. And as I was doing research, I have a master's degree from the London School of Economics, and I was actually preparing to try and go into a PhD program. And I wanted to do research specifically on the neuroscience of how people choose people. And wow. It's funny because the moment when we're deciding, who to choose, our brains are often experiencing something that's called choice overload. And that is basically when there are so many different options to choose from that our brain becomes quickly overwhelmed in trying to decide where to go or what to do. So we become stressed, we became overwhelmed, we became frustrated. And so this is a lot of times the mental place that our clients and prospects are in when they encounter our marketing or when they encounter our websites. And so how can we communicate in such a way that eliminates those negative feelings that people are feeling, right? So, when you're speaking with attorneys specifically, right? People don't just happily and joyfully reach out to attorneys because their lives are perfect, right? Oftentimes people reach out to attorneys because they're dealing and grappling with a very serious challenge or something that's very frustrating. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, when they do a Google search of, attorneys who provide goods and services, they're probably overwhelmed with the number of people that are out there to choose from. And so in that moment, when they are experiencing these things, how can we communicate? Well, I discovered that, for example, and I think for attorneys, this is the most prevalent. When people are trying to experience, figure out who do I hire, et cetera, most attorneys go for what I call the achievement mindset, which is where they talk about, well, here's my previous experience, performance, my performance indicators, the prestigious things I've done, and also here are the percentages of my success. Well, that's all well and good. But the thing is that in this moment, when we're overwhelmed with options to choose from, percentages and lists of prestigious accomplishments that you have aren't going to really influence me. Rather, I coach my clients to talk about people-centered problems and then people-based results. Okay. Now, what that means is tell me stories about how you have helped people in my exact same situation. And then tell me about how you help them resolve their emotions, what you're able to deliver for them, and what you are feeling. When we communicate about feelings, and this is a weird thing, but when we communicate about feelings and we hear stories about people who are experiencing things, our brain undergoes this very powerful experience where we actually relive. We are putting ourselves in the shoes of the people who are experiencing those things, and we actually feel those emotions. And so when a client comes to your website and they're stressed and overwhelmed, and you immediately say, let me tell you a story about a client who, just like you, is dealing with these specific things. Here are the emotions. Here's what we did to solve it. And here's what they felt afterwards. You are all of a sudden bypassing the neurodefenses of choice overload and speaking to the heart, specifically to an emotion-driven part of our brain, right? But that is one of the most powerful ways that we can immediately and quickly and effectively reach prospects in the moment that they're experiencing choice overload.
Choice overload. I heard this saying as you were talking, and thank you for that. I heard this saying recently. Somebody said, people are either overwhelmed or bored. And when you were talking about that choice overload and that story and that connection and how to really influence people, I was thinking about that there's going to just to visualize walking through as you were speaking and going to some of the attorneys' websites or even anybody's website when I'm making a decision of who to hire or work with, et cetera. And you're either bored or overwhelmed. Some of these websites, I'm like, I'm not even clear on what they do. There's everything in the kitchen sink here.
Yes. Yes. And, it's funny. I often tell my clients that our marketing needs to be it needs to enter the conversation that's already happening in our clients' brains. So what I mean by that is, I think in order to be successful, you need to be able to do three things: capture attention, establish credibility, and then cultivate influence. Only after you've done those three things will then people start putting money on the table and saying, okay, I want to work with you. Well, here's the thing is that most of our marketing is all about the first two steps, like capturing attention and establishing credibility. And that's great. But when a client is, they've landed on our website, they agree. So we've captured their attention. And if they're reading through our website, well, we've already established credibility. They believe that we can provide the good and serve what they're looking for. We need to then look at stage 3 of how do we cultivate influence so that they'll choose us over everybody else. But the problem is that our marketing and our websites and how we do it often gets stuck on first base, right? We're just trying to capture attention, or we're trying to establish credibility, but our clients or prospects are usually ahead of that. They're on board, right? They agree that we have the credibility and the qualifications. They're looking now, how will we influence them to choose us? And so that's a real kind of mental shift of how to think, when we do pitches or build our websites, we've already got them. We've already captured attention and we've established our credibility. And if we simply are only playing for second base when our clients are trying to play for third base, we're going to miss an opportunity.
How do you cultivate influence? To your point, I mean, most of our listeners are entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, or work for a very successful entrepreneur, and by and large, attorneys, right? So I think everybody on the planet knows it is no small feat to go into law school and to make it out of law school and pass the bar. And some of the specializations that people have in LLM and taxation and specialized attorney and certified elder law attorney, and not those additional. So you have the credibility. And I tell attorneys that all the time and I love this conversation. They already know that you know how to do your job. They already know what it took for you to become a lawyer in the United States of America. It's, we all knew that growing up, lawyers and doctors, that it's difficult. How I love this third step that I think is where we are all missing as entrepreneurs, and why I'm so excited for today's conversation of really how like the simple question of how do you cultivate influence? And I know it's not a simple answer.
Yeah. And, I dive into it. There's a lot of different ways to do it, obviously. And I cover that in my book, in the influence mindset. But I think one of there's a key fundamental, that principle that I think it's important to understand. And that is, a problem is not a problem until someone feels something about it. Now, what do I mean by this? I used to work for a time in ultra high net worth finance, where we're dealing with trust administration for extremely, extremely wealthy clients. And one day I woke up and I saw, the notification that the markets had taken a downturn that morning. So I was kind of gearing up for battle because it was going to be a rough day at the office. And I show up and I see that, other teams I was working with, they were just overwhelmed. They're just being swamped with phone calls. And then I got to my part of the office and it was, quiet as can be. And I talked to my advisor when he came in and I was like, everyone else is swamped. How come we're not? And he's like, well, you got to understand, our clientele are a little bit different than theirs. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, the clients that those people have on that side of the office are, recently signed on. They're younger people who haven't gone through these market cycles a whole lot. But our book of business that we're maintaining are a bunch of widows and elderly ladies that have been through this a ton. And so what I learned from that, again, is that the same situation, right? Market downturn happened. One group of people felt something, and then that was a problem. And then they called our office as they needed it fixed. But our book of business was the same situation, but they didn't feel anything about it. Therefore, it wasn't a problem. They weren't worried. So again, a problem is not a problem until someone feels something. So when clients come to us, right, when prospects come, they have problems. But those problems are primarily problems because they're feeling things about it. So if we want to influence, then we need to help resolve emotions first and then talk about how we can solve a problem, right? Because you've probably had an experience where there was something in your life and you had a lot of feelings and a charge about it. And then a friend just probably told you, well, yeah, here's what you do, right? And even though it was the correct answer, you still probably had a lot of leftover feelings about how to resolve it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that problem wasn't resolved for you, even though they gave you the right course of action. So how can attorneys and entrepreneurs help resolve some of these challenges? And I call this the "I love your people" line. Okay, and what I mean by this is, when people come in and they're like, they're talking about their challenge and they're sharing their emotions. One of the first things that I coach my clients to do is to talk in terms of what I call purposeful partnerships. And I mentioned this in the book, but specifically to say, you know what, boy, you are in the right place because I love working with people just like you in your specific situation, right? So whatever it is, whether it's clients still have a client who works with disability people in disability law. And he, I coach him to say the first thing, wow, boy, what a story. And that I empathize with them. And then the next thing is, you're in the right place because I love working with clients just like you who are dealing with these exact same problems. So all of a sudden, you've just changed the emotional balance in the room. And they feel peace of mind. They feel assured, right? They feel like they have encouragement, and you've introduced hope because you have influenced them to see you as not just the solution, but also a place where they can release a lot of the challenging emotions that have brought them to you in the first place.
And as you know, you have attorney clients, and attorneys are all go right to the problem first and foremost, and just this 2 millimeter shift. And I just love in your book, and even in the title of the book, that it is an art and science of getting people to choose you and just resolving the emotion first and then the problem.
Yes, because they're going to feel much more. I mean, you're doing there are fireworks going off inside of people's brains. I kid you not. When you resolve the emotions first and empathize and connect with them, and you tell, emotionally driven stories, there's literal fireworks that neuroscientists have measured and seen when these things happen. And so, again, a problem's not a problem until someone feels something. And it's because of that emotion that they're driven to meet with you in the first place. And so we got to resolve. That's the tip of the spear when they walk in your office, is the emotion. Then let's talk about the momentum of the rest of it behind it.
Yeah. And I think as you were talking about even those fireworks, and when they walk into your office or Zoom room in this day and age, whatever that looks like, I was thinking about, what about the people at the front desk who are answering the phone, and what a massive miss it is to not at least have this arsenal of this art and science of knowing how to resolve their emotions first. Because I would assume If you're not doing it in your Salesforce or whatever your process is, if it's calling into the office or when they opt in to your funnels or whatever it might be, handling that before they even get in for that consultation or that sales call or whatever it is, if you don't even handle it, how many people probably deal with cancellations, reschedules, and all that because you don't have your team really armed with this one simple statement, a powerful statement, impactful statement, game-changing statement of how to resolve emotions first.
Yeah, it's a huge thing because you gotta think of your entire pipeline, because it's not just the front desk people, and they are an integral part. But what is your social media presence like? Is it merely talking about performance indicators, prestige, and percentages, which is important, right? Or is it mixed within we're here to resolve your emotions as well, like to help you feel peace of mind. So it's not just, and so then they get to the front desk officers and they're working with the staff. And that is such an important part because people are coming in when when they enter your office and they're meeting with your front staff. I would imagine that their emotions are as strong as they've ever been. Right? Just think about it, right? What were they feeling when they looked online and found your office? Okay. And then what were they feeling when they got into their car and they're driving over? Or what were they feeling when they get out of the car and they're now going into an unknown building and they grasp their hands on the door handle of your office and they finally say, okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start finally to look at this problem down in my life. Because some, legal issues have a lot of pent up emotions. Like, sometimes there's shame, sometimes there's fear and sadness. And then when they finally walk through that door and they see your staff, they see your office, that's when they are most likely to turn right around and feel even more negative emotions. But when they walk up to your front office desk and your staff are there to welcome them and to immediately start to dissipate and to assure them and to start the process of delivering peace of mind. Boy, what an incredible brand experience that is.
Yeah. Even if you are getting in the car, picking up the phone, I'm even thinking of some of our divorce attorney or elder law attorney, even picking up the phone and calling in saying, having those emotions about maybe having to take the car keys away from mom or saying out loud, this might be the very first person that you've ever said out loud to, I want to get a divorce, or I just got a DUI, or whatever it might be, in thinking, or I need to possibly put my mother in a home or take her keys away or what have you. I mean, just even think of those couple statements right there.
Those are immensely powerful. And I mean, in my family, we've had to deal with some of those exact same things. And I totally know what that feels like. And so the moment that, they start engaging with your brand, and it's a brand experience from step one till, signing the documents, I guess. But how can you just assure them you're in the right place? You've done the right thing. You are on the right path. We love working with people in your exact same situation, and we handle this all the time. This may be incredibly difficult and painful for you, but there is a process. There is a reliable way that we go about this, and you will get the results of what you want and and you will feel what you want to feel. And then let's start talking the technical stuff. I mean, now on the converse side, now that hopefully your listeners have kind of put themselves in the shoes of gosh, the feelings and the shame and everything. Imagine how it feels when you're feeling these things and you walk in and someone just starts talking technical jargon to you, right? And and start saying, well, okay, here's all these things I need you to fill out. Here's these forms and everything. And now on top of those feelings, you are feeling overwhelmed. You may be feeling unintelligent, right? How many times in adult life do we encounter situations where we feel completely, out of our depths? And it's occasionally. And do we like feeling those things? No, we try and avoid those situations. And so, yeah, but once you assure and say, boy, you're in the right place, you are influencing them to say, I've made the right decision. Because then the most important thing here is that when all this is done, people will refer you, not just because you solved their problem, but people will refer you to others because you made them feel a certain way. And that's the real business growth driver that we often lose sight of.
Yeah. And why they'll choose you. As you were speaking, you said something really powerful to really wrap a bow on that statement when you're connecting with your client or prospective client. And you say, we love working with people in your exact situation. And here's what I took away and wrote down that you said, and here's where we get our greatest joy, because you will feel what you want to feel at the end of this journey. And I love that, because think of you're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner, whatever it might be, and somebody pulls you aside and says whatever they're grappling with when you ask how they're doing, and they tell you what they're feeling. I'm feeling so much shame or embarrassment or what have you. And imagine if you're right off the bat, you giving them those exact words, again, the art and science of people choosing you, and you really hammer into them and you tie a nice bow onto it of saying, and I love what you just said, you will feel what you want to feel. And that's ultimately, I mean, what do you want to feel? I want to, unburden this guilt, this shame, this whatever it is, a heartache. I want peace of mind about this. I want someone to tell me and guide me on what I should be doing, so I'm not sitting in this place of confusion and uncertainty.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not saying to establish a therapy office here, right? It's you will get the results that you want. I will resolve those concerns, but also we will also help you feel this too, right? So it's all too often we simply just play the one side of that. Yeah, okay, we'll get you the results that you want. We'll fix that. That's going to be easy. But then when we also then tie in emotionally drenched communication. You will feel this, or even one of the most powerful phrases is imagine, right? When you're sitting there and just you're explaining this problem, and then you're trying to paint a picture of what the process will be like at the end. I mean, wow, if you say this phrase, imagine what it will be like when, okay? When you're sitting there with the client, or maybe this isn't a YouTube video that you're producing or a social media post, and you talk about the problem, imagine what it would feel like to have peace of mind with the concern and issue that you're dealing with, but also imagine what it would feel like to feel relieved that this is out of the way. Imagine what it would feel like to have this off your plate and the assurance that this is being taken care of by the best people possible. Notice how we just did that. Instead of saying, I am the best person, I have the best qualifications, I've done this for 35 years, because that's the exact same message they're going to get from everybody else who's using the achievement mindset. Okay. What if instead you're saying, imagine what it would feel like to have this taken care of off your plate and feeling peace of mind and assurance that the best people who've dealt with this hundreds of times are taking care of it, and you don't have to deal with it. It's a completely different way of communicating.
Yes. Yeah. And we're all visual. Most people are visual learners. And I love imagine is one of the most powerful words. That I wrote that down. That's great.
Yeah. And because when you do that, what's happening on the neuroscience side. Again, this is not just some, frou-frou, really nice, warm, fuzzy sounding thing. When you invite people to imagine a future state, you are bringing their brain into experiencing in real time a version of reality that you are controlling and you are cultivating. And that's an immensely powerful thing. an immensely powerful tool. So, and again, it just has to do with how our brains deal with stories and how emotions drive our decision-making process, and et cetera. So it's an amazingly powerful thing.
Mm. You've given us I hope listeners, if you are out walking or jogging or whatever you do when you listen to podcasts, make certain you go back and take some notes on this one. I'm actually going to upload this and get it transcribed. And of course, you will get all this in the Influence Mindset book. I'll have a link in the show notes of how you get this on good old Amazon.com. Christian, talk to us about how the influence game has changed. I'm really in this day and age, and I know pandemic and all that, a lot has changed, and how our listeners can quickly and easily influence and really adopt this and get awareness of this to be able to either pivot or show up in a better way to cut through all the noise and the crowds and the competition and all that jazz.
Yeah, no, the influence game has totally changed. And how we outreach and communicate. In years past, you could get by with presenting, your clients with this overwhelming smorgasbord of options to choose from of all the services that you could do. But your communication now has to be a lot sharper, a lot more focused. It's funny. I was in tying into this, and this is in the book. We are bombarded with more and more information than we've ever been bombarded by in the history of humankind. Our brains have to filter and go through and process just exponentially more pieces of information. And I think in the book, it was like 30 gigabytes, I think, a day of data that our brains now have to deal with. But the thing is, evolutionarily, our brains are not wired to be able to process vast amounts of information like we are today. And it's funny because what's happened as a result of this is that our attention spans have collectively gotten shorter and shorter and shorter because our brains are having to process so much information. So if our collective, attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter, that means our communications and our personal brand message has to be even more direct and intentional. If we just think, I'll just put something out there and that'll be good enough, or I'm just doing this for the sake of just having some content out there, that's nice, but it's not doing what you need it to be doing for your business. We need to be very much more intentional about what we're communicating and think a lot more about the user experience of when they engage with our website or go through our funnel or come into our office or meet with us, because there are a lot of other options that they can choose from. And those options are more readily available and accessible. But if we need to decide, if we want to attract people, we can't just answer why I am smart, capable, and qualified and passionate. I need to be answering what I call the fifth step, and that is why you should do business with me. Mm-hmm. And what I mean, let me explain the fifth step. There are 4 steps that clients have to take in order to work with us. The first is they have to agree that, there's a problem in their life, right? And then the second step is that there's this problem that, it needs to be solved urgently, right? Or it needs to be solved. The third step is that, hey, there are solutions that exist to your problem. And then the fourth step is we are an excellent solution for your problem. So again, right? There's a problem. Mm-hmm. This needs to be solved. I can't just put this off. Hey, there are actual steps I can take. And then we are a really good option and we're smart, capable, qualified, and passionate. Well, those are the 4 steps. But the 5th step is, here's why you should do business with me over everybody else. The thing is, 99% of people in their business marketing is stuck on step 4. We are a good option for business. We are smart, capable, qualified, and passionate. Look at our degrees. Look at the years we've been in business. But if you are saying the exact same thing that everybody else is saying, you've now induced choice overload into the person's brain. They're stressed, frustrated, and overwhelmed. So you need to be speaking from the get-go why you should do business with me, aka cultivating influence from step one. Because that way you are already speaking higher and above your competition. And that needs to be an intentional thing. We can't just, hope that that happens in our pipelines and funnels. So to me, the collective game of influence has changed. Our attention spans are shorter because we have to process so much more information. And therefore, step 4 communication, aka smart, capable, qualified, and passionate, doesn't cut it anymore. We need to be speaking in what I call the 5th step. Here's why you should do business with me. And that's what the influence mindset does.
Oh, that's fantastic. I cannot wait to upload this to rev.com and get this transcribed for our listeners. As you were talking, I'm just even thinking of myself. So often when we're on social media and getting bombarded with information and data and everybody selling their services, what have you, I think, and I hear attorneys and business owners and even myself say this all the time, like, what the heck? Why did they, to hire this person? They don't have as much years of service as I do in this specific craft, in this specific niche, what have you. And you just nailed exactly why in the story that we make up in their head. Well, they're not as qualified as me. They haven't been around. They don't have this degree, etc. And it's because of that step 5 that the person has absolutely nailed of why you should do business with me.
Yeah. Well, this comes down to what I call the fundamental law of success. And that is, and I'm just making sure I'm reading this right, but your success is based on your ability to influence people to choose you. That's really it, right? And whether that investment takes the time of energy, money, time, or attention, you have to convince people to choose and invest in you. That is the fundamental law of success. You may be the smartest person. You may have the greatest, solutions on the planet. You may have the greatest, service offerings. But if you can't convince someone to walk over the bridge and join you, it doesn't matter. It does not matter a single thing. So we need to think it's not about proving you're smart and capable and qualified. It's about influencing people to choose you over others.
Beautifully said. Wow. What would you, for our listeners in closing, what are some, I don't know, tips of how they can even get started of really doing a deep dive assessment of if they've had these 5 steps even nailed?
For sure. There's a lot of things to do. And I think one of the easiest and low-hanging fruits is, again, this is in my book, and I talk about it with more detail. And that is, when I speak to students and everything, I tell them, look, I'm going to say 2 sentences. And this first sentence is going to make me sound like the most horrible human being ever. But I guarantee it, and it's going to fly in the face of all the advice you've ever gotten. But I really believe it's true. And it's this. First, whatever you do, don't pursue your passions. Now, that's a really horrible thing to say. Instead, I want you to pursue problems that you're passionate about solving. Now, how does this have to do with your entrepreneurs? How many times on your website does it say, or in your marketing videos, you say, we are passionate about blank? And most of the time we're passionate about helping people. Well, that's nice, but helping people, I think, is a very, very vague and unexpressive passion. Rather, I would dial down into, number 1, who is your core market, right? What are the problems that they're experiencing? And more importantly, what are the emotions that they're experiencing with those problems? And then in your marketing, don't just say we're passionate about helping people, because that's like saying, oh, we're passionate about providing a buffet of answers, when they are there for a specific thing. Instead, the low-hanging fruit is, in your marketing, we are passionate about helping people in your specific situation who are feeling these specific things, and here's how we solve, and we love working with you, people who are exactly like you. Once you put those lenses on of instead of just passions, but problem focused passions. And then speaking in terms of what I call purposeful partnerships, that should give you the tool set to be able to kind of sharpen and hone each stage of your funnel. But literally ask yourself, what is someone feeling when they click your ad on Facebook? Or what is someone feeling when they pick up the phone, or they walk into your office, or they open your door, just like I explained earlier, or they walk up to your front desk? What are they feeling? And then how can you resolve those feelings first and assure them, and then provide the solutions that they need?
You just gave us $1 billion framework right there for your intake process, what your team can say when they're answering your phones, your marketing messages, to your point, your videos and ads on Facebook, what have you. I'm just even sitting here thinking of some of our clients, and if just making these changes about so often, you go to people's websites, or it's all about what they're passionate about, to your point, or it's always about our mission and our vision and our values. And they just land like that's how you break through the noise, and that's how you stand out.
Yeah. Well, it's oftentimes removing barriers and smoothing over speed bumps that will make a great business successful. I remember I grew up in Southern California, and there was a theme park that, it was one of the more affordable options to go to compared to the more ritzy ones. And we went to it, and it was, I remember we got on this one roller coaster ride, and it was a really fun ride, but it was just really, really bumpy. It was very uncomfortable, right? Yes, we hit those speeds. Yes, we did the loops. Yes, they did the thrills, and it was a really well done, roller coaster. But you know what we remembered when we got off of it was that was really bumpy, and actually, my head, kind of the restraining straps really dug in, and they were quite uncomfortable. And because we had such kind of a negative experience of how bumpy it was, we didn't have a good experience at that park. And we didn't really go back to that park as a family because of how uncomfortable it was, even though they had all the rides, right? It had the loops, the speeds, everything. But it was because of how uncomfortable the straps were and how it was just very bumpy and unpleasant that we decided, no, we're not going to go back again. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So same thing. What are the emotional speed bumps of, did we make someone feel uncomfortable? Did I, kind of target them and say, how come you haven't come to me sooner? Right? That's a shame-laden question in your sales process you want to get rid of, but it's just assurance all the way. You're in the right place. You're doing the right thing. You come right at the right time. You're in the right spot. We're going to get you taken care of because we love helping people with your exact same problem. And we're going to get this solved. And imagine how it will feel when this is done. Boom. That's an entire pipeline right there.
And we are going to navigate all the bumps and bruises while you have a comfortable ride.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. I love that analogy. All right, Christian, thank you for being our guest today. Listeners, I'm going to have in the show notes here, the influence mindset, the art and science of getting people to choose you. Go buy the book, hit Amazon up. And I'm going to, again, have the link. How else can our listeners stay connected to you?
They're welcome to, connect with me on my website. I'm building out a lot of different prospects right now, but I'd love to have a conversation and see how I can help them with either their marketing or reimagining and talking through their funnel. And identifying, where are some of the pain points that they can resolve and take care of. So I'd love to have a conversation and see how I can help people apply the influence mindset to, reach their goals and ultimately capture attention, establish credibility, and cultivate influence.
Thank you. Thank you for being our guest. Absolutely. Thank you for writing this amazing body of work. And I have my book here, as I showed you before we kicked off, and I have dog ears and highlights, and I love to just consistently pick this up and anchor to it. So listeners, get a copy of this book today. And I'm truly going to transcribe this podcast and put that in the show notes too, because there's no shortage of verbiage and language and scripts that you can adopt in your front office with your intake coordinator, client service coordinator, receptionist, whatever terminology resonates with you. And in the conference room, just taking these tips can make the difference in your practice of, going from a place of wonder and worry to hire for your client. So thank you for being with us today, Christian.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, Molly.
If you like what you hear on our podcast, please feel free to visit our website at hiringandempoweringsolutions.com. So we love that you are listening to this podcast. Please drop us a line with any feedback, suggested topics you'd like to hear. And absolutely, we'd love to hear about your victories and your win in regards to creating entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world.